Cool. So this is updating a component in GitLab UI, and I learned a lot during this process, and I wanted to share it with the rest of the team because I think it's really valuable to know how our components are not only designed and how we go through that process, but also how they're built. I think it makes us a better designer overall. So I'm going to be covering that today. And this is based on my experience. For the last month, I've taken Toggle from discussion all the way through to GitLab UI. So we talked about it during the discussion, during the discussion phase, checked and updated usage guidelines and pajamas, then updated in Figma, and then took it through to GitLab UI. And I learned a lot more about our components, especially toggles, so much that Jeremy even designed me a hat. So what the showcase is going to cover is how learning GitLab UI can help you become a more effective designer working with your counterparts. My experience updating the GitLab toggle, reading the view component docs, just a basic overview. So if you come across these, I think it'll make you more effective in being able to read these, and things I learned along the way that might help you. So how it can help you become a better designer is for better collaboration. When working with your counterparts, you'll speak the same language, and knowing how they're built and used can create better collaboration. And it can also prevent some examples of toggle that I came across on GitLab.com were actually not conforming to our usage guidelines. So just better collaboration, speaking the same language, being able to recommend and show some of these components during your design proposals, it'll make things a lot smoother for that. It'll also help you become a component advocate. So as we design, we not only know the components that we need, but also what they can do and the limitations that they have. So again, this sort of goes to the collaboration aspect as well, but it helps you think component first and become a component advocate, pajamas advocate. And then end-to-end knowledge. I always believed if you are designing a car, I think you should know as much about how that car works, almost as much as the engineers do, not to the complete capacity that they do, but knowing at least the basics of how things work can help you design that car in a way that is going to make sense in the end. So the toggle update, the task seemed to be a pretty easy one. Add help text to the toggle. And I'm like, all right, yeah, no problem. But then the process is like, no, not so fast. Take a step back. This is not going to be as smooth as you think it is. So first, let's talk about it. We talked about it. Thank you, Jeremy, Tori, and Pedro for talking about what seemed to be a simple task was not, because there was a lot of things happening around usage and things that needed to be updated. So that discussion was fantastic to go through. And then, once it was kind of during, it wasn't necessarily in order, it was somewhat in conjunction with one another. So, during and after discussion, to take a look at the usage guidelines and to update if needed. There was some updating that needed to happen, particularly with the positioning of the label for the toggle, and a large discussion around whether we put toggles in forms that have a submit button, or if they don't, even though our current usage guidelines say to not have a submit or sort of a final submit like in a form. So to update the pajamas documentation is there. And then to update in Figma, there was only an individual toggle, but help text needed to be added as well as the label. So went through that process as well. And then once we had, a good understanding of usage guidelines, the discussion, we were on board with the discussions, everyone was on board. And the Figma update, this was when I went into GitLab UI and to update this as well. So our current, the way we have it set up is we have these stories, and you'll see this in the view component docs when you look at a component. These are not set up in a way, these don't conform to what we had determined before in all of those other areas. And so so I updated it. Yay, and then it was awesome. The MR was reviewed, it was merged. I thought everything was going smoothly. And then process was like, no, 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 hold on, not so fast. And the MR actually got reverted. So that was really frustrating, but it was a big learning experience and I learned a lot from this. Specifically here, the reason why it was reverted was there's a check to see if the existing GitLab toggles on GitLab.com will break with the merge request that was merged. So luckily, we have amazing engineers who put this check in place so that if changes happen and they come over to GitLab.com, it will actually fail the update because of breaking changes. It detects these breaking changes. And there were some really cool features. And so this is a cool feature alert, and it's the integration test MR. So basically what this does, not only do we have that failing test if something does break with your GitLab UI update, we have a manual job in GitLab UI, so you can create a branch on GitLab to review in your GDK to actually go and update those toggles so you don't have that failing check afterwards. So you update GitLab UI and you create an integration merge request on GitLab. You can update all the toggles to make sure that everything is in line and nothing's going to break. Then they eventually pass. So I thought this was a really cool feature that I wanted to point out. And this is going to become a lot more common as we get closer to 100% component adoption, when we're mostly updating components rather than creating them from scratch and saying, here's the first component on GitLab. We'll have a bunch. So if you do go through this process, I thought I would pass this along because I think it's a really cool feature for integration testing. And here's just one example of a benefit for updating components and sort of simplifying them. And so we were able to save a lot of code here and simplify things to use the label, and in other cases, you can add a help attribute here. But then of course there's failing pipelines, and it gives us sort of this, it seems frustrating because you go through all of these and you get something to pass and then you're good. And then all of a sudden there's another failing pipeline, but yet you have to look at this as a learning experience and something that's going to help you improve your skills as a designer. Oh no, where'd my image go? No. Hold on, I'm sorry. My image isn't here. Oh, well, it was there a second ago. Basically, I'll put this in afterwards, so if people want to check out the slides, I'll put a link to the Figma doc. But there's a feature, another cool feature in GitLab UI for GitLab UI is in Storybook, the place where you can go view all the different components and the view component docs that end up getting pulled in. You can check a box that says include GitLab CSS. So basically what that does is it looks at your changes locally, but if you check that box, it pulls in our master GitLab CSS. So you can see if anything's going to be overriding your changes. And if there are, then that's going to show a failure in the pipeline. So this is really useful when you're doing a GitLab UI update to check this GitLab CSS box and see if there's going to be any differences to prevent that sort of failure there. And then once you do that, yes, we love green check marks, a lot better than the red. So that was sort of a very small summation of my experience doing that. And there's a lot more intricacies, but only having 15 minutes. But I hope that just sort of gives you an overview of the kind of things to expect when updating GitLab UI. So this, I just wanted to just review the view component docs properties for a component. So just for people that might not know or aren't 100% sure. So basically, if you're looking at the view component docs or view docs for the component, you'll see these properties here. And so for instance, for toggle, we have a label and help text. And as you can see here in the code itself, we have these attributes, label and help. And these are what show up in the docs. And then it tells you what it takes as well. So this is a string. So label you'll add text here as a string, and then help will be a string as well. So just sort of like showing the relationship between the code and what you're reading in the docs. I think seeing this will give you a much better idea of, how it might be structured and what's possible to do with these components. And you can see we have disabled here as well and is loading. And this is what that code actually looks like, just the actual like source of the toggle. So as you can see, a label lives here and it takes a label string, and then help takes a help string. So this is to sort of show in relation with the last slide as well. So things I learned that I wanted to pass along is, while it does require a little coding knowledge, it's not impossible if you are looking for a new challenge and looking to contribute to GitLab UI. There is a link at the bottom of this actually, and thank you, Tori, for giving me this link yesterday. There's some weighted issues. So with the weight of 1, that if you want to tackle something simple for GitLab UI, there's the link there that you can go and see these issues. And new challenge, we always like try and add new challenges to our day-to-day and make things interesting if things are getting monotonous in your realm of GitLab or whatever. But 2 is don't be discouraged. So I failed like a bunch of times, as you can see, the red failing pipelines can be discouraging, but just take the opportunity as a learning opportunity. And I wasn't sure really what GitLab UI was until I actually really got into it. And it's essentially an NPM package that we deploy and then we pull into GitLab. So if you've ever created your own site or app, it would be the same as if you were to NPM install whatever. So you can actually NPM install the GitLab UI if you wanted to use it for your own project. So hopefully that makes you a little bit more familiar as to what GitLab UI is if you haven't really dug into it very much. And the integration testing manual job, it's going to become more common as we get closer to complete component adoption. So I thought I would point that out as something to keep in mind as we go along. And collaboration is key. Don't be afraid to ask for help, or you don't know something, and that's okay. You'll learn more by trying and failing. It's fun. It can be discouraging at times, but once you get it to pass, it's twice as encouraging as it was discouraging. So it actually gets twice as good. And I suggest everyone go through this process. Understanding how we build components from our designs is really insightful, and I think it'll make you a better designer at GitLab. And in general, you'll speak the same language with your counterparts. And that's it. Thank you. If you want to pick my brain or you want to do some pair coding on GitLab UI on some of these issues, you can ping me in the Foundations channel or on GitLab. And that's it. Thank you.